All right, so we're diving in today on this whole Bobrisky situation.
Yeah,
We've got a ton of reports on like all the the drama, the legal stuff, the travel chaos. It's been pretty
it
wild.
really has.
And I'm really curious to like get your take on everything once we kind of break it down.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating case. We're talking about Idris Okunai, better known as Bobrisky, a very prominent Nigerian cross-dresser who's, built up this huge persona. And lately, though, as you said, it's been a little less about the glam and more about the courtroom.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where things get really interesting, especially for our deep dive today. I mean, a 6-month prison sentence for Naira abuse, and then boom, suddenly released after what, just a few weeks?
Yeah,
To a private location, no less. It just seems like there's got to be more to that story.
there almost always is,
Yeah.
especially, within the Nigerian legal system. Nigeria abuse, for anyone who might not be familiar with the term, essentially means defacing or tampering with Nigeria's currency. It's seen as, incredibly disrespectful, almost like an insult to the nation itself.
So it's not like just spending too much money at the club. This is like literally messing with the banknotes.
Yeah, precisely. And that in itself is interesting
Hmm.
because it suggests a certain level of intentionality behind it. But then to be released so quickly after the sentencing, that raises questions about potential influence or even, outright corruption within the legal system. Things don't often move that fast unless there's some pressure from somewhere.
And it wasn't just that, right? There were then money laundering allegations on top of it all.
Oh, absolutely. And those are very serious. A social media influencer accused Bobrisky of attempting to bribe officials from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, to get those charges dropped.
Okay, so the EFCC, that's kind of like the FBI of Nigeria. They deal with the financial crimes.
Yes,
Yeah.
very similar. And what makes this even more intriguing is there's actually an audio recording that's surfaced, allegedly featuring Bobrisky discussing this bribe. Now, of course, the authenticity of the recording still needs to be verified. But if it is genuine,
It's a smoking gun, isn't it?
it could be.
I'm interested to hear what you make of this recording, in the context of Nigeria's legal system. How much weight does something like this carry?
Potentially a lot.
Mm.
Bribery accusations are taken very seriously. And that kind of evidence, even if it's just an allegation, can have a huge impact on public perception. And remember, this is all playing out against a backdrop of, existing concerns about corruption within Nigerian institutions. This case could easily become a symbol, whether Bobrisky is ultimately found guilty or not.
Wow, so you're saying this goes way beyond just one person's legal troubles.
Absolutely. This case touches on much deeper anxieties and mistrust within Nigerian society. People are already skeptical of the power structures. And this situation just plays right into those fears. It becomes a story about who gets away with what and who has the power to manipulate the system.
So we have this whole legal drama unfolding.
Yeah.
And then Bobrisky tries to leave the country. And that's when the travel chaos starts.
Right. First, Bobrisky was stopped from boarding a flight to Amsterdam. Then, after reportedly buying 3 business-class tickets, each costing a staggering 9.8 million naira, they finally managed to leave on a first-class ticket.
Hold on, let's break that down for a second. We're talking about roughly 12,000 US dollars per ticket, almost $36,000 just to try and leave the country. It's a power move.
It is, and I think that's a really key insight into Bobrisky's persona and the complexities of this whole story. We're not dealing with someone who's just wealthy. We're looking at someone who's accustomed to using that wealth to overcome obstacles. It's a statement, a display of influence, even in the face of legal troubles.
Okay, I see what you mean. And then Bobrisky's explanation for all of this was to attend to my sanity and my health, blaming frustrations with Nigerian security agencies. What's your take on that statement?
Well, there's likely a genuine element of distress in there. The intense public scrutiny, the legal battles, the accusations. It would take a toll on anyone's mental health. But I think there's also a strategic element to that statement.
So you're saying it's calculated, a way to control the narrative.
Exactly. Remember, Bobrisky is a master of manipulating media attention. Framing it as a mental health issue helps deflect blame from the legal troubles and potentially garners public sympathy. It's a way of saying, I'm the victim here.
So, bit of both. Genuine distress, but also carefully crafted message to the public. It seems like everything about this story has these layers to it.
It does. It does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. And that's, I think, where the bigger picture starts to come into focus. We can't really separate this whole story from the social context of Nigeria and the complexities of being someone like Bobrisky in that environment.
Yeah, you're right. We've talked about the legal system, the accusations, the wealth. But what does all of this tell us about Bobrisky's position in Nigerian society?
Well, Bobrisky's persona is deliberately provocative.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the flaunting of, luxury purchases, designer, clothes, those lavish parties. It's a very in-your-face kind of wealth. And in a place like Nigeria, where there's this constant tension between conservative values and more progressive ideas, that kind of display becomes a statement.
Yeah, it's almost like a challenge to the status quo, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that's both incredibly empowering and incredibly risky. Remember, we're talking about a country where same-sex relationships are criminalized
Mm-hmm.
and societal stigma is intense. So even with the wealth and the platform, Bobrisky is still navigating a very precarious space.
It's almost a paradox, isn't it? The fame and the wealth provide a certain level of protection, a way to be seen and heard. But at the same time, it makes Bobrisky a target for scrutiny and potentially even more backlash.
Precisely. And I think that's why these recent events are so significant. Are these legal troubles and accusations a direct result of Bobrisky's boldness? Is it a form of pushback from a system that feels threatened? It's hard to say for sure, but the timing is certainly interesting.
So, how do you think this is all going to play out? I mean, what are the potential consequences, both legally and socially, for Bobrisky?
Well, legally, it's difficult to predict. The Nigerian legal system can be unpredictable, as we've seen. But the money laundering allegations are serious. And if that audio recording is proven authentic, the potential bribery charge could lead to even more trouble.
And socially, could this damage Bobrisky's brand and following?
It's possible. Some followers or sponsors might be turned off by the controversy, see it as, going too far.
Right.
But there's also a possibility that this will only amplify Bobrisky's notoriety, turn them into a kind of folk hero for those who admire their defiance.
So it's a gamble, really. Pushing boundaries can gain you attention, but it can also backfire.
Exactly. And I think that's a key element of this whole story. It forces us to ask, how far can you push before the system pushes back? And at what cost?
It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. There are setbacks, there are risks, and there are consequences.
Yes, and Bobrisky's story, I think, really highlights those complexities. It's not just a Nigerian story either. It resonates on a global level. These themes of wealth disparity, social justice struggles of LGBTQ plus communities, the power of social media, the double-edged sword of fame, they're all universal.
It's amazing how these individual stories can become windows into these much larger issues, isn't it? Like, we started with a deep dive into Bobrisky, and now we're talking about the power dynamics of entire systems.
That's the beauty of really digging into a story like this. You start to see the connections, the patterns, the things that link seemingly disparate events and experiences.
So where do we go from here? What can we learn from Bobrisky's experiences, both the positive and the negative?
Well, on one hand, there's the incredible resilience Bobrisky has shown in the face of adversity. The courage to be oneself, to challenge norms, to build a platform, even when facing intense societal pressure. That's something to admire.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see someone break down barriers and refuse to be silenced even when the stakes are so high.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, there's also a cautionary tale here. The potential consequences of pushing too far, of engaging in risky behavior, and the fact that even wealth and fame can't always protect you from the system.
It's like a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility, and that even those who seem to have it all still face challenges and make mistakes.
Exactly. And I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us, whether we're public figures or just trying to navigate our own lives.
This deep dive has definitely been thought-provoking. It's gone beyond the headlines and really gotten into the heart of some complex issues.
And that's the goal, isn't it? To move beyond surface-level analysis and really grapple with the nuances and contradictions that shape our world.
It's about recognizing the humanity of those involved, even when we might disagree with their choices or actions.
Yeah, it does feel like we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much to unpack. I mean, the legal battles, the social implications, the role of the media, Bobrisky's own identity, it's all tangled together.
It really is, and that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. It's not about finding easy answers or taking sides. It's about exploring the nuances and the gray areas. That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, and one thing that keeps coming back to me is the role of social media in all this. I mean, Bobrisky's rise to fame is directly tied to their online presence.
Oh, absolutely. Social media has been this incredibly powerful tool for self-expression, especially for marginalized communities. It allows individuals to kind of bypass those traditional gatekeepers, connect with a global audience, build their own platforms.
Right. But it's also a space where misinformation can spread so easily.
Mhm.
And public figures are under this constant and often very harsh spotlight. It's a double-edged sword, no doubt about it. It can be incredibly liberating and incredibly dangerous at the same time. It gives you a voice, but it also amplifies your vulnerabilities.
So, in a way, Bobrisky's story is also a story about the power and peril of social media, right? It's about how you navigate that space, how you build a following, but also how you manage the risks that come with that visibility.
Exactly. And I think that's a relevant lesson for all of us, even if we're not, aspiring social media stars. It's about understanding the dynamics of these online spaces, how
Yeah.
they can be used for good or for ill, and how we can all be more critical consumers of the information we encounter there.
It makes you think about whose voices are being heard, whose stories are being told, and who ultimately is controlling the narrative.
Right. And that brings us back to, I think, one of the core questions of this whole deep dive. Is Bobrisky a victim of circumstance, a savvy manipulator, or somewhere in between? I don't think there's an easy answer, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's about embracing the complexity, right? And realizing that even in a story like this, where there are clear conflicts and controversies, there's also a lot of nuance.
Exactly. And that's, I think, where true understanding lies. Not in rushing to judgment or choosing sides, but in acknowledging those multiple perspectives that are at play.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you'd leave our listener with? What do you hope they'll walk away pondering?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they'll appreciate just the complexity of this story, that it's not just about one individual, but about the interplay of social forces, individual choices, and the power dynamics at play in a society like Nigeria.
It's a reminder that the personal is often political, isn't it? And that these individual stories can give us these insights into much larger issues.
Absolutely. And I think it's also a call to action in a way, to be more informed, more engaged, and more willing to question the narratives that we're presented with.
To think critically about the information we consume, especially on social media, and to consider the perspectives of those who might be different from us.
Well said. And to remember that there's always more to learn, more to understand, and more to discuss.
Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today. It's been a fascinating deep dive into a story that's still very much unfolding. Who knows what twists and turns are coming next for Bobrisky?
Only time will tell. But I have a feeling this is a story we'll be hearing about for a while to come. And hopefully it'll continue to spark those important conversations about the issues that we've touched on today.
Well, on that note, we'll leave our listeners with those thought-provoking questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we hope you'll be back for more exploration soon.